5, 6, 7, 8.
Welcome to the EX Podcast, where I talk with business leaders, authors, and disruptors on how the workplace is changing. This podcast brings a different lens to the conversation around HR transformation, company culture, and employee engagement. It offers a brand and customer experience perspective rather than a traditional HR perspective. Why? Because companies have to think of themselves as employment brands if they want to attract and retain talent. It is time we put people first to rehumanize the workplace. Simply because leaders who don't care about the employees will eventually be surrounded by people who don't care about their business. Today's guest is Ken Oehler, Senior Partner, Global Culture and Engagement Practice Leader at Kincentric. Today with Ken, we talk about what is his definition of the employee experience, how to design an EX that aligns with business needs and accelerates performance, how to define and measure moments that matter, how to deliver an impactful EX, how can organizations unlock the power of people through EX, and how can organizations elevate their EX. Support for this podcast is brought to you by Life Guides. Responding to the inevitable and expected life challenges of your employees is one of the most profound opportunities to express your level of care, empathy, and compassion for the well-being of your people. The Life Guides network partners with organizations who recognize this profound opportunity and provides them with a platform to match the employees who are going through a specific life challenge with trained guides who have successfully navigated the same life challenge. Life Guides is a peer-to-peer network that exists to unlock and share the largest untapped and valuable resource on the planet, human wisdom and experience. Find out more at www.lifeguides.com. I hope you enjoy this conversation with Ken. Because it takes a good amount of time to produce this podcast, please make sure to review the podcast on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, TuneIn, or YouTube, as it will help promote the content. If you want me to speak at your next event, get some advice on your EX initiatives, or send me feedback and suggestions for future topics or guests, you can reach me at svincent@exsummit.com or on Twitter at EX_summit. All right, let's get to it. Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the EX Podcast. I'm very excited for today's guest, Ken Oehler. Ken is calling from the New York City area, and he's a senior partner, global culture and engagement practice leader at Kincentric. Ken, thanks for being with us today.
Thanks, Stefan. Great to be here.
What is your background and what does Kincentric do?
Yeah, so Kincentric is a new name, a new company, but you've heard of us before. We are a company that came about from the divestiture of the culture and engagement, leadership, and HR advisory practices from Aon Consulting that were sold to Spencer Stuart. So Kincentric has been around for a long time. We've done a lot of research, done a lot of work with clients, but the name is somewhat new. Our mission is to unlock the power of people in teams, and we do this through a combination of consulting solutions, data-driven insights, and scaling our solutions exponentially through beautiful, intuitive technology. My background is I'm an industrial organizational psychologist. By educational background, I have been in consulting most of my career in the areas of strategic culture change management, total rewards, people analytics, employee engagement, and employee experience. And as you mentioned, I lead our culture and engagement practice globally.
Let's start with your definition about the employee experience. There are many definitions out there, and not one is better than the other. But let's go with your definition, and I'm sure it's aligned with Kincentric's definition as well.
Yeah, it's a really great question. So we just completed our second annual a global employee experience study with over 1,300 HR and executive leaders responding to our study about what's going on in the space of employee experience. What's interesting is about 8 out of 10 of the organizations responding said they think employee experience, or EX, is really, really important. They're really focused on it. I think it's important to the business strategy, but only about a third say they have a good working definition of what this means. So how Kincentric defines employee experience is thinking about all aspects of the work that affect an employee throughout their employment lifecycle, from pre-hire all the way to exit, even when they might be an alumni of an organization. Practically speaking, EX is really about how culture and engagement come to life, or not, across moments that matter for employees across this employee life cycle. And we have found that in order to do this well, you really need to have a strong combination of strategy, continuous dialogue, and delivery. And our study shows that about a third of the organizations think they're doing this effectively right now, or beating the progress against their objectives on this right now.
It's interesting because I think there are a lot of good intentions about focusing on the employee experience, but many organizations don't know where to start and how to do it. And there's always the question, even when I interview or talk to CEOs and HR leaders, it's great to focus on the employee experience or a culture, but how does it impact the real business performance? How do you design, from your experience and the work that you've done with many companies, how do you design an EX that aligns with business needs and accelerates performance as well?
Yeah, as I mentioned, I think this combination of strategy, continuous dialogue, and delivery are really important. What we've found is that really starting with strategy is the key to success, and this is what our data and our experience show as well. And starting with a strategy that's grounded in organizational effectiveness and change management, in behavior change, so that you are starting with this question of how are we going to architect this thing, and how are we going to architect an employee experience that meets our business needs. And like architecture of a house, do you need a mansion with many different wings, or do you need a smaller home, or do you just need a summer cottage for what it is that your business needs? So practically speaking, almost all of the upfront consulting work that we're doing with clients involves strategy and change management. It starts with articulating or reconfirming the talent strategy, which is really about what types of employees, where, doing what, and how are you going to source and retain these employees against your business objectives. And then starting to define what is the required culture that we have based on our business strategy, our business objectives. What are the cultural behaviors that matter, and for whom, for what segments of the population, and what is that employee experience that will unlock those behaviors, and what are the experiences that might get in the way of those behaviors that create value, and making sure you're architecting these experiences in the right way. And then one of the other really important things about strategy is upfront change management setting, so that you're readying the organization for this. That this isn't about implementing a new performance management system or a new technology system or an ERP system. This is about readying the organization for behavior change and behaviors that align with what matters. And the prerequisite for that is everyone's clear on what are those behaviors and things that matter for employees. And that's really the core of making sure you're connecting the employee experience to business results.
So do you start with a very specific identified business problem, and then you look at how you can leverage the people within organizations to address and solve this problem? Or do you start with understanding the employees' pain points, and then you design a strategy that is going to be aligned with the expected business outcomes? But you start from, do you start from an organization's perspective, or do you start from an employee's perspective?
Yeah, I think it's a bit of both. I mean, really what we're talking about with employee experience is this is a two-way pact between the organization. And so I'll give you an example. I would say more often than not, you may start with, say, some employee surveys, and I think how employee experience is evolving is starting with something like the annual engagement survey. And what preliminary information does that give you about the employee experience, where pain points might exist? But also starting with some organizational objectives. And I'll just give you a couple examples. So, one organization we worked with was really focused on customer delivery. That was a business priority for them, reimagining how they serve customers and what that meant for people in their customer service centers. So right away, that was an articulation of the business need, a particular segment of their workforce. And then the question became, what things are working or in the way or need to be developed to unlock people's discretionary effort, to unlock their energy, inspire them against those business objectives. Now, coming at it from the other way, where you might be listening to employees, they may start telling you where pain points that you didn't even know existed. And then the question becomes, well, should we fix this, or should we maybe just remove this altogether? Because this actually has no, something that may be a pain point, whether it's, like a technology system or a process, that as you dig into it, you may find, this actually doesn't really have a whole lot of relevance to where we're going as a business. So rather than just sort of fixing it, so to speak, you might just stop or reimagine it altogether. So I really think it's about the two-way pact and making sure you're connecting both. If you over-rotate on it's only about the business and sort of imposing this experience on employees, you're likely to go wrong. If you're only saying, well, what do employees want? And they're saying, well, we want foosball tables, and foosball tables really don't matter for the business, then you might, waste time and effort on these things as well.
How do you define those moments that matter that you talked about a few minutes ago?
Yeah. There's an exceptional book by Heath and Heath called The Power of Moments. I'm sure many people listening have read this. And they talk about moments that matter are things like high points, low points, moments of transition, et cetera. And the concept that, not all moments matter. There's lots of moments, but there are some that matter more than others. So understanding these high points, low points, and moments of transition, and more importantly, how being able to identify those in terms of how they either elevate, inspire, connect you with other people, or might be a way to just simply remove friction, something that is a reduction of pain. What's important about this is the ones that elevate, meaning someone is getting better, developing, or they're inspired, or they're pleasantly surprised, or they're connecting with others in really meaningful, important ways. Those tend to be more impactful to outcomes, to business, more memorable than ones that simply remove friction or remove pain. The vast majority of the moments that matter that we're seeing our clients focusing on, and things that we're seeing from the study, the employee experience study that we did, not surprisingly, most companies are saying we're really focused on employee engagement and culture. But those aren't really moments. Those are sort of a collection of moments, or the outcome of moments, and they're also at the center of what a strategic employee experience would be. What the respondents are saying and what we're seeing is they're really focused on things like onboarding, performance management, recognition, even exit. And these make sense in the frame of moments that matter, because these are all milestones or high points or low points or transitions of sorts. The reality is you don't really know what all these moments that matter are until you take a design thinking approach and really build empathy for people and view the work experience through their eyes, and understand what they're trying to do, what they'd like to stop doing, what it is that's truly going to unlock their energy.
And those moments and those moments that matter also vary from one employee group to another. They're not consistent across the entire spectrum of employees.
Correct. Just as an example, you could take, an executive segment. Many times these men and women are very busy people that they view technology as an enabler, right? And they're not necessarily going to have time to dig into new technological processes. And they have needs that might be technology just needs to work. Whereas other segments of the organization, say a people analytics group, really want to dive into the technology and they want to see features and things that, statistical models, et cetera, that allow their work to be better, more effective, allow them to put their thinking to work at scale. So very different needs for really sort of the same delivery mechanism of employee experience. Or, you could take, say, a call center example, one of these clients that we've worked with, things like being able to just take some time off, and what is the experience of being able to take time off, given sort of the intense scheduling that goes along. Is there a long waiting line? Can the manager override that, or can I just submit a ticket to take some time off? These are the things that matter both to the business and very much to the person who feels pretty stressed out in that environment.
One mistake that I see companies do is they think of the employee journey or life cycle as the different from their. They see that from their perspective, meaning they see all those different stages. Again, from an organization's standpoint, meaning. Okay, so there's the interview process, there's the onboarding process, and then you get promoted, you have some formal training, and then you get through the exit interview, and then that's it, goodbye. Right? While employees see that in many different ways. I bring my personal life to work, and I bring my work life to bring home. And there are many different things that affect my level of engagement, productivity, performance. And I expect my employer to address those different elements. So those are the moments that matter to me, not necessarily the moments that matter to the organization.
That's right. I mean, the onboarding, development, rewards, exit, these are, they are moments that matter. They're also very easy ones, and they're sort of generic because they sort of affect almost every employee. But as you mentioned, this is sort of an an inside-out view from HR to the employee. These are programs that we have in place, and we want to know how your experience is with them. But as you mentioned, those probably matter differently for different segments, and then there's the experiences that maybe you don't know about at all until you really start listening to employees, and you might find all sorts of things that you didn't know existed. One of the things that we're finding in our research is that the area of experience that companies want to know more about it at a very accelerated rate, meaning more and more companies are leaning into this, is what is the experience of change? And I think so much is going on with organizations in this sort of rapidly changing environment and context. And whether you're going through M&A, a system implementation, divestiture, whatever it may be, and all the flavors of what that change is and feels like, companies are really wanting to understand what that experience of change is, because if you can't bring people along with you on that journey, you're really going to have a tough time. And we're finding that in order to bring people along, it's not just about this rational communication of here's this new program or new software, use it. It's really about understanding and inspiring them. And what inspires those people can really vary from, oh, this is just better, I'm so excited to be part of this new company and inspired by this vision, to, oh, now they want me to fundamentally change my job, or as part of a merger and acquisition, now maybe I'm worried about my job, and all those little touch points and the moments that are giving signals to that as people are going through change, because there's so much ambiguity. There's many, many different things to be understood about that. And those are also highly variable and less sort of, it's very difficult to tap into or make that sort of, this is just the way we do it, like an onboarding program or an exit survey or something like that, because the nuances of change can be so dynamic from case to case.
Now, once you design and define those moments that matter, I would say probably even a bigger challenge is how do you measure those moments that matter? How do you measure any change in behaviors and performance and outcomes?
Yeah. So the measurement, I think we've seen a sharp increase, moving away from, say, an annual engagement survey to more and more pulsing. Interestingly enough, our study, we asked people, what other methods are you using to measure this? And one of the top area, other than surveys, was face-to-face meetings. And what we're seeing is, there's sort of a rotation back to human interaction, just real listening to understand that, and using not just sort of qualitative measures as a measurement exercise, but actually an intervention in of itself. Largely speaking, though, this is happening more through real-time surveys that ping off of events. You had an onboarding event. Here's this survey, or we just, had a town hall meeting. How was that event? To get that feedback as the measurement exercise. This is a rapidly evolving space, and there's new and more ways to measure this, whether it may be natural language processing, reading comments, reading the blogosphere, what people are saying, both current and former employees. We're looking at organizational network analysis, how people are interacting with each other. What is, the experience of networking, and how change and work actually happens in informal structure. So the field is getting bigger and bigger, and there's new ways to really understand. And I think we have to expand our way. We're measuring and understanding the employee experience beyond just surveys or survey technology.
And I like it because it's not, annual surveys or performance reviews are valuable to some extent, but you can't really get the pulse of your employees only once a year. There are many things that impact employees' engagements and productivity on a regular basis. Where you think if you think of, let's say, the finance team or accounting team, and they're super busy when taxes come in, like in the spring, and they may feel overwhelmed at that time. While maybe in the summer, when it's a bit slower, they feel good and about their jobs. Now, the sales team, I would say probably every quarter, at the end of every quarter, they feel the urgency and the pressure of getting results in, because that's where they're going to get the bonuses. And HR may be a bit more stressed around the fall time, when they have to work on upcoming employee benefit programs for the coming year. So you can't just rely on one annual survey to get the pulse of the employees. You really have to, as you said, to do this on a regular basis, so that not only you identify what are the moments that impact performance, engagements, and productivity, but also you can make adjustments along the way depending on the insights that you gather.
That's exactly right. And I would add that beyond just measurements that are, I would say, more passive in nature of like, what is the employee experience? How did you experience that bonus cycle, this quarterly bonus cycle, if you're the salesperson? Also, perhaps one of the more important questions is the employee experience getting better? And are the outcomes, back to that business connection, are the outcomes actually getting better? Meaning, the hypothesis being, if you have a great employee experience, you're going to see lower turnover, or better customer results, or better financial results, better operating results. One organization we were working with that was going to an agile framework, we were measuring the extent to which how they experienced decisions being made, and were they agile or really slow. And over time, as things were getting in place, you didn't necessarily see the change in, say, employee engagement metrics, but what you did see is a mark in how decisions were getting made, and the fact that when they were going through software development, that no longer were they talking about, when is this thing going to be ready for my customer, but it was a more robust conversation about the overall technology roadmap and interplay between different constituents in the organization, the business, the tech team, the sales team, the operations team, to solve these problems in an agile way. That you actually did see those behavioral changes, even though maybe the more frequent measure around engagement really wasn't moving a whole lot. So you have to think about, ultimately, is it getting better, and are the outcomes you want from your employee experience getting better?
We talked about how to define the moments that matter, that is the foundation of an EX strategy. We talked about identifying metrics to measure the effectiveness of EX initiatives. Now, how do you deliver an impactful EX?
First, there's no silver bullet. There a lot of organizations are looking for, this app really changed our way, or we went digital, we put a bunch of apps in place, and what we're finding is actually companies that sort of over-rotate on digital actually decrease the employee experience because it's overwhelming and the different apps don't talk to each other, et cetera. This is the work that we do with clients. Some of our experts in our HR advisory practice do. Once the strategy is set, once you've been thinking about measuring and continuous dialogue, feedback loops, how do you optimize the HR function to deliver the programs, the technology, the systems, and people capability and capacity to actually bring this to life? And we really think that there's this intersection between programs, technology, and people. One of the good examples of this is if you don't have all three of these aligned, it really isn't going to be fully optimized. A good example would be the debate that was going on around performance management ratings. Should we blow up performance management? Should we change the ratings, et cetera? Now we've got it in a technology system, so we're having annual ratings reviews, quarterly rating reviews, whatever it is. That was, I would say, over-reliant rating scales, or we have a rating scale at all, and how do you implement that through technology? Largely, it's what happened and why that debate started was the people that mattered most, employees and managers, were really frustrated with those processes. And even if you change the programs, you get rid of ratings, you get a new technology system. If people don't have the capability, capacity to have better feedback conversations about performance and how that fits into all the nuances of pay and development, et cetera, all those other moments that matter, if the people aren't ready and they're fundamentally not changing their behavior, it's not going to get any better. It might actually get worse because now if you did away with ratings, now you've got no ratings and people still aren't having the conversations you want. So it's really this combination of programs, technology, and people that matter, and how you bring this to life.
And one challenge that companies face is they take best practices from other organizations, or that they've read about something, and they could just stack up a bunch of initiatives or a bunch of apps, as you discussed, to try to enhance employee engagements and experience and productivity. But they don't look at it from a cohesive and holistic perspective. So by stacking up different tools or different programs, it doesn't really solve the issue of the engagement or how people really feel about their contribution to the workplace, or how they feel about their own experience working in the organization. So the goal is really to have that holistic and cohesive view on what it takes to create and enhance this employee experience, and not just adding a bunch of things or programs or initiatives that may not have any impact or very minimal impact.
That's right. And sometimes, what we're finding with most organizations is the vast majority are on a journey, right? There are very few that you would say, well, this is the way.
Yes.
What we're finding is many organizations may be over-rotated on, like, let's just throw a bunch of apps at people, or let's do a lot, or let's go with this whole survey system and pulsing system, to kind of coming back a little bit with a less is more approach, like really focusing on who matters. And before you implement, say, technology or an app, get back to the question of, what are we trying to do? Technology largely is about knocking off sharp edges, becoming more efficient, delivering something in a meaningful experience that is easy, right? Taking away tasks and being able to scale this. But at its heart, you still need, well, what is that thing that you're trying to deliver? Are you back to the moments that matter? Is that delivering something that's inspiring, elevating, connecting. And if not, or if you haven't fully thought that through, you probably want to hit the pause button and kind of go back to your strategy.
An impactful EX strategy is designed around the employees. How do organizations unlock the power of people through EX?
Yeah, this is a really important question. I mean, this is the question. You know, I would say never forget this objective. And so it's about, you know, if you think about all the moments that happen from the time someone is getting for work, maybe checking their emails on weekends, to the time they walk in the door, or, you know, logging in from a telecommuting to the time they stop working that day. There's many, many moments. Getting many of those moments right by elevating, developing, inspiring, connecting unlocks people's energy and motivation, gets them clear on the behaviors that matter. Getting too many of those moments wrong destroys value. You know, you're creating frustration, reduces organizational agility, it may increase turnover, inhibits customer delivery, et cetera. From our study, we had some lessons from what we're calling the extraordinary organizations. These are a smaller subset that say they're actually doing pretty well on the strategy, measurement, and delivery. And compared to the vast majority of the respondents, these are folks that are saying, like 8 out of 10 of them are saying that we've got a differentiated employee experience, we're achieving meaningful behavior change. What they're doing differently is all the things we've been talking about, is starting with the strategy. The people they're really focused on is they're focusing on high potentials, high performers, the leadership pipeline. And if you think about what that means in terms of employee segments, it's very future oriented, right? It's who's next, who's coming next that is going to be really important for our future. So that's one clue. It's, you know, you have to do that for everybody, but that's a pattern we're seeing in these extraordinary organizations. The other one around continuous dialogue, and this is really, really important, is in the measurement space, they're starting with a hypothesis-driven approach. And if you think about what's happened with surveys over the years, and even pulses, it's either, you know, a pulse that's on auto repeat, an ENPS score, or an engagement survey, and there are these measurement vehicles looking for problems, meaning you send the survey, let's analyze the data, let's see what are our priorities, and now let's try to rally the organization or people into action. What the best are starting to do is starting with a hypothesis, meaning I want to create a better employee experience, and I think that actually means getting the employee their computer on the first day, having a meeting, getting a team around them, et cetera. And if I don't see those things, if the people start telling me this is not happening, I know exactly what to do. I know the decisions that will get queued off of the data. The example I give is, you know, if you go to the doctor and they take your heart rate and it's racing at 160 beats per minute, the doctor doesn't say, I wonder what that means. Let's think about that for a while. They know exactly what that means, and they're going to have probably jump into action pretty quickly if they actually think you're in danger at that point. So knowing what a metric will mean and what decisions it's trying to inform is really, really critical. And then on delivery, the things that we're seeing are setting these extraordinary organizations apart is having role clarity, governance of the HR function, meaning who is responsible for listening, who's responsible for taking action. The other piece that we're seeing is loud and clear is that people are really trumping technology in the programs to that performance management example I gave you before, and HR and manager capacity seems to be the constraining factor for most organizations, and the best are figuring out how to free that up so that people are ready to react. They're actually involved in the interventions in the listening itself.
How can organizations elevate their employee experience?
Yeah, I would say starting, again, going back to strategy, thinking about where the HR function, optimizing the HR function to be ready to deliver. Starting with a design thinking approach is absolutely critical. Getting yourself in the shoes of critical employee segments or users, understanding what they're trying to do, what they're trying to stop doing. The other thing is, there's a lot of talk about organizational agility.
Yes.
And whether that's from a business perspective, we need to be agile to keep up with our competition, or we just need to have more agile processes ourselves because it's just frustrating. The the experience of work is largely frustrating for a lot of people because there's slow decision-making processes that don't work very well, et cetera. When you think about employee experience, and as we're talking about continuous dialogue and the ability to have a user-centric, a design thinking approach, there's this sort of you're never done concept. Employee experience, if done right, is an agile process. It's not a project. It's a process that is always in flux, meaning you have to always be listening. You need to co-create with people, with the actual recipients of the employee experience, rather than, hey, HR or leaders design this in a vacuum and now we're going to push it out to the organization. And what's interesting about this is it's when we see these organizations start to do this well, it's not only an agile process in and of itself, but it actually helps demonstrate to the rest of the organization how you become more agile.
Yes.
If the overarching objective is we need to have an agile culture or we need to create more organizational agility, this actually is sort of an intervention in and of itself. It's a part of the culture change that helps against that higher order objective.
It's about having candid conversations saying, we know that we had to improve our employee experience. We want you employees to be part of it. It's going to be an ongoing process. It may be messy at times. There are times that it may not work the way we want it to work, but let's get on it together and let's work together. And that's part of the agile process where you just, you test, you iterate based on the feedback you're getting, making some enhancements and improvements, and you just keep testing and testing and testing. It's as you said, it's not a project, meaning there's a dead end to it. It's a process where it's continuously evolving. That's right. So a really interesting example I mentioned a couple times, this call center organization that we've worked with, and we've recognized them as a best employer organization, meaning they've got top quartile levels of engagement, leadership, talent focus, organizational agility, et cetera. And they were, being a call center organization, they were very focused on customer outcomes and had actually done CX or customer experience pretty well. But they started to hear some things from the employee experience that things were getting in the way. It was too difficult. And at the core of the employee experience were these elements of trust and connection and things that were getting in the way of that. And they completely flipped it and said, we're going to use the same approach that we do with customers with our employees. And that meant there was a ticket system where you could put in a ticket for anything about your employee experience, and someone would respond or at least acknowledge it within 24 hours to see if there were some quick solutions or is this something larger. But there was a sort of immediate feedback and starting that co-creation process. I mentioned some things about being able to take time off, and rather than saying, hey, I want to take some time off, and a manager saying, well, I can't do that right now because our scheduling won't allow it. They flipped it so that an employee could just submit it, and I'm going to take this time off. And so there was more trust that employees were going to do what they needed to do for the business, and yet still get their time off. And then this concept of people connection, there was some mandatory manager training that was going on, whether you were a new or existing manager. There was a pretty in-depth process on people skills only to improve this concept of human connection with people. And that was really what mattered for them. And they took all the lessons that have been in the customer experience, CX space, that they were already doing well, that I think that space has known for a while, and really we're applying that to the employee experience. Before we wrap up our discussion today, let me ask you some fun questions. If you were to invite a historical historical figure to dinner, who would you pick and why? I think I would really like to meet and talk to the Dalai Lama. I think that these concepts of compassion, mindfulness, a lot of people are talking about this, having practiced some of this myself. It's changed me as a person. It's changed me as a leader. And I think organizations are starting to really get in tune with this. And I think there are lessons
that we can all learn from this wisdom.
If you had the ability to go back in time, any time in history, which time would you pick?
If I knew I wasn't going to die, I might go back to the time of the dinosaurs. I'd be just absolutely fascinated what that was like on Earth, and also assuming I could come back.
Okay, nice. What was your biggest screw up at work, and what did you learn from it?
How long do you have? Some things that come to mind that I reflect on. A lot of people talk about failures, and it's sort of a paradox that I've learned a couple times is, don't, or rather than like getting too risk averse or thinking about like, how do I avoid a failure? It's more like, how do I be ready to succeed? And don't be too risk averse. And an example I give you, a few years back, I've developed a few products over my career. We had a really cool product that we developed. It was one of the early employee listening, always on pulsing products. And we used an agile process, and we were using a fail fast technique. We really leaned into that. And what happened is we didn't fail fast. We got a lot of really good feedback, and we knew we were onto something. But we were too risk averse, and we weren't really ready to blitz scale. So we got caught a little flat-footed because we weren't really ready to succeed just yet. And I think the next lesson along those lines is don't give up too quickly. What profession other than your own would you like to attend? Probably an astronomer. I'm a huge Star Trek, Neil deGrasse Tyson fan. I'm just absolutely fascinated by space. Really been fascinated by the Apollo 11 anniversary and all the things we've learned. I just have an endless curiosity about what is out there, what's beyond our current level of comprehension. If we could go to another planet, if we have to go to another planet at some point, what will that mean? How are we going to do that? I'm a total space nerd. If you were to be sent to a deserted island and you were given the choice to take only 3 survival items, which ones would you pick? Probably want a big knife, some way of purifying water, and an acoustic guitar. Nice. That's pretty cool. I like it. 2 very critical elements, and the other one are probably even as critical, just for the peace of mind, just to be able to relax a little bit. Yeah, figure I might have a lot of time on my hands. Love it. What is your favorite word? Thanks. What is your least favorite word? Should. What is the way for our listeners to follow you and Kincentric on social media? Yeah, so obviously you can go to our website, kincentric.com, KINCENTRIC.com. You can also follow us along the SpencerStewart.com website. You can follow me on LinkedIn and Twitter, and Twitter handles are @KincentricCo, and my Twitter handle is @OehlerKen. And we'll share those on our podcast notes. Any last word of advice or wisdom for our listeners? I think some of the lessons that we've seen in our employee experience study, particularly from the extraordinary organizations, are be future-oriented and be change-oriented. How are things changing? What things will matter most in the future, and build a strategy around that. The tagline we've been talking about is strategy eats the survey for breakfast. And people are the ones who deliver the employee experience to people. And don't forget that. Fantastic. Well, it's been a pleasure to have you, Ken, on the podcast with us. Thanks so much, Stefan. I really appreciate it. Thanks for tuning in to the EX Podcast. If you want to learn more, visit our website at expodcast.com. If you want to find out more about our next conferences, go to exsummit.com. Finally, you can also find my manifesto on business to employee or B2E branding at b2ebranding.co. See you next week.